What is going on, everyone? Hope you're having a great day. It's your boy Armando filling in for Dan and Kurt Smith. We kind of had to do a little bit of reshuffling as far as our schedules and our shows. So today I'm filling in for Kurt and Dan, like I mentioned. We're going to do a short episode today. No special guest. We're going to be talking about the most underrated, in my opinion, the most underrated bait in the market right now. Few people talk about this bait, and it is absolutely one of the best baits you can have in your arsenal. But before we get to that, couple announcements. First of all, we are doing a live, with not a live, but we are doing a giveaway. It's going to be with some of our sponsors or partners, Catch Outdoors. We're probably going to get like a board, catch board with it to do a giveaway. We are also going to do a giveaway with the Dark Horse Tackle guys. It's going to be some free baits coming up and also some apparel for Douglas rods. The way to enter that giveaway is simple. Go to Apple Podcasts. If you have an Android phone, you can still go through your browser, web browser, and enter Apple Podcasts. Um, but either way, it's through the app or through a web browser. Look for Apple Podcasts or Bass Kayak and Beers. We need you to leave us your review. We would prefer it to be a 5-star review, but if you feel we haven't earned a 5-star review, don't worry, we won't take it personal. But leave a review and a comment with your name at the bottom. Sign the comment. That way we know who you are and we'll announce the winners in the last episode for March. So again, go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review with a comment, sign with your name, and we'll announce the winner in the last episode in March in the Advanced Kayak Angler. We'll also repeat it in the following episode for the real life, which if you listen to our podcast before, you know it's live every Thursday on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And if you're new to this podcast, if this is the first time you're listening to us, welcome to the Bass Kayak and Beers. We have two shows: the Advanced Kayak Angler, the one that you're listening to right now, usually with Dan Perry and Kurt Smith, where they, for the most part, or usually bring an expert angler to talk about a specific bait, technique, or scenario for bass fishing. And then there's also the real life, which is a live show, like I mentioned, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where your boy here, Armando, interviews content creators, people involved in bass fishing on the industry side of it, tournament anglers, or anybody that just has a passion for bass fishing and kayak fishing. And we talk about anything and everything, not just bass fishing. Talk about sports, talk about life. It's a fun episode. You should definitely listen to it if you're into that. But let's get started with today's episode. And again, we're going to be talking about the most underrated bait, bass fishing, and that is drum roll, please, if I can get this to work. Nope, I don't want that announcement. The inline spinner. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can see it. If you're not, I'll try to describe it for you. An inline spinner is kind of like a spinner bait, but instead of having the willow blades on top of your bait, it's just like the name suggests, inline. First of all, you have these willow blade on the front. In the middle, typically you'll have like a weight, and in the bottom, at the end, you will have like a little feather, and in it, it's going to be a treble hook. There are other versions of it, but this is the most popular one. Usually, it goes by the name of rooster tail, and that's kind of like a whole chatterbait kind of thing. You know, the chatterbait is pretty much a bladed jig that got coined by seamen as a chatterbait, and it kind of stuck. Same thing. A lot of people call it the rooster tail because that's the most popular brand that manufactures this bait. But in reality, it's called an inline spinner. There are different brands. My favorite are the Rooster Tails and the MEPS. MEPS are a little bit more durable, in my opinion. Rooster Tails, though, catch you a lot of fish. And one of the reasons why I believe it's the most underrated bait is actually a few reasons. First of all, you can use it for pretty much anything out there, not just bass fishing. Let me close this screen right here. Not just bass fishing. I use it for trout fishing. I use it for fishing for perch. Some of you call it sand bass, white bass, um, striped bass, perch, whatever you want to call it, panfish, and stripers. And it works great with all of them. About the only time where I throw the MEPS brand is when I'm fishing for trout. All the rest that I mentioned, I pretty much stick with the rooster tail. The other reason why I think it's one of the most underrated baits, it's because of its design. With the treble hook being all the way at the bottom or at the end of the bait, even with a short strike, the hookup ratio is a lot higher, probably than any other bait out there. And again, that's because the treble hook, which is hidden in that little feather tail, that's why they call it rooster tail, it's all the way on the back. So even with a short strike, they're gonna get hooked. It's very rarely that you get a short strike and not hook him. Again, the hookup ratio is amazing. The best way to guarantee a good hookup ratio a lot of times has to do with your setup. You want to make sure, especially if you're going finesse with it, that your tension on your spool is not too tight. These are um, thin wire treble hooks, so they can bend out if you're fighting a big bass and if your tension spool is really tight. You don't set the hook like you would with a jig or a Texas rig where you just, swing for the fences. This is more of a crankbait kind of hook set where you just lean into it. If you feel the tension and you see that rod tip bending, you just lean onto it. No need to do a hard hook set because the wires are so thin, they are gonna get good penetration on that bass or whatever fish that you're fishing for. And because it's usually very lightweight and the treble hook is kind of like in a free, kind of like a swing head, it even if the bass is or the fish is thrashing around, shaking its head, it's very hard for it to dislodge that bait in it. But again, you have to make sure that you are not putting a lot of tension on the spool. You have to have a little give weight, sort of what you would do with like a treble hook. I'm not a treble hook with like a drop shot or a Ned rig, where you just lean into it and trust that the rod is going to do its work. Another great thing about it is there comes in different weights. For example, I have one. This one, I have one here that's about a half ounce. I can work this way down in the water column. Typically, the deepest I'll go with this type of bait is 10 feet. Anything, if I see fish on the graph that are, 15 feet below, I'm not going to even throw that. You can also throw it really shallow with like a quarter ounce or 3/16 or 1/8. Does a great job of imitating um, small bait fish. The design of it, it's not bulky at all. Even if you're throwing the heaviest version of it, it is still a very slender design. Um, and it again, it imitates bait fish very good. The attraction that it's gonna get, it's gonna be mostly out of the willow blade. Now, the willow blade doesn't turn on itself. What it does, it just goes around. It just does a 360 around the body of the bait, and it creates this vibration. Obviously, if it's sunny, you get the flash out of it. This one, for example, the rooster tail has that metallic sticker. Try to see that even at uh, high sun. If it's very sunny day, you can see it just like you're seeing it now flashing. That even brings another level of attraction. I like to use it early in the morning when bass are pinning bait fish at the back and pockets in the coves or creeks. A lot of times you keep your eyes open, you're looking for bait fish that are, jumping around. For example, I was pre-fishing on Ray Roberts um, earlier last week, and I noticed while I was trying to figure out if I was going to go deep, mid, or the back of the cove, I noticed towards the back of the cove, I noticed some small bait fish jumping. Usually at this time of the year, when the weather starts getting colder, um, water temperatures drop, a lot of the older shad are starting to die off. So you're gonna have a lot of the younger, smaller shad uh, be out there. So you're gonna see more of the smaller shad than you would out of the older, bigger shad. So having a small presentation, especially at this time of the year or late in the year, is key. It works great because that's going to be the forage that a lot of the bass are are looking for, especially when they start moving right now, when they're moving up to spawn or to stage up for spawn, they're pinning those small bait fish to the bank. It is also a great bait for spawning season. You throw, for example, like got tangled up with the other ones, like a little. This one, I think it's a 316. If you throw this past, for example, a bed and you start bringing in slowly over it, maybe pause it right when you're getting on top of the bait, I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, that male or female is going to just hammer it. So it is a great for pre spawning, it is great for spawning, and it's great for post spawning. There's really not, as far as season goes, there's no bad time or season not to be throwing this. As far as scenario goes, about the only scenario, there's two scenarios where you won't see me throwing an inline spinner. If the grass is almost all the way to the surface, where you can only pretty much throw something like a treble hook, I mean, something like a frog or pitching a jig, then yes, of course, I'm not going to throw that because that a back treble hook is going to get caught up all the time. It's too shallow to use it. The grass is all the way to the top. But if the grass is like a foot or further down, then I'll use it like a top water, like I would use buzz baits. If it's I can go with I the half ounce, I'll usually throw it with my crankbait setup, and I'll let it work. It's something between 5 and 10 feet deep. Um, and I'll use medium heavy um, or medium moderate to fast rod with a reel that's going to be like 6.4 or less, typical crankbait reel. But if I want to work the surface of it, I can still use this half ounce, but I'll switch it over to my top water setup, which is going to be probably like a medium heavy to heavy with a fast reel, something like an 8 point or above. And then you can just use it like a wake bait, almost like a top water. You can skim it over grass that's 1 feet deep or more. That's a great idea. The other only scenario where you probably won't see me throwing it, if there is a lot of like brush piles or a lot of stick ups, a lot of brush, just around the shoreline. It's probably not a good idea because 9 out of 10 times you're gonna get it hung up in that brush, and then you have to go get it, or you're gonna have to cut it off, and you're gonna scare away other fish. So that's pretty much the only two scenarios. If there's a lot of brush, lay downs that are really shallow, grass that are really shallow. I don't want to risk blowing up that spot by using that. I use it on open water when I am out there fishing for sand bass or white bass, whatever you want to call it, perch. For example, Lake Louisville, I got a couple of offshore points or underwater points that are about a quarter of a mile from the shore. And if I see that there are, top water hits, like usually um, striped bass or hybrids, are just roaming the open waters, searching for bait balls, I'll throw it in real quick. Grapevine Lake, I'll use it where there's a lot of like, again, striped bass and white bass patrolling the bank or close to the bank of the dam. Throw it there as well. Work it fast, work it slow, depending on what you see on your graph. If the fish are higher up to the surface or lower to the bottom, that's when I'll choose, um, what size I'm going to use it, how I'm going to work it, if it's going to be deep or shallow. But again, there's really no bad scenarios to use it. I use it for trout fishing. When they stock trouts, I know some people don't like trout fishing. I love trout fishing. I love how it tastes. And when they're stocking trout in the Bassos River, you better be sure I'm throwing in a spinner bait. And again, you'll limit out on trouts, you'll limit out on white bass when they're spawning. I'm gonna tell you, if you ever want to do a catch and cook and have fun, go look for go look for creeks where white bass, striped bass, whatever you want to call it, where they are spawning. Throw one of those inline spinners, especially white, with the white color or shad imitation. Trust me, I've gotten 25 bag limits in 2 hours, sometimes in 1 hour. They cannot resist it. Resist it. If you get there just at the right time, it's great. This is every year when white bass and striped bass are spawning. I get giddy just thinking about throwing this out there because you're gonna get bit so much with this bait. And again, you can use it. There comes with different colors. Usually, white and black are the ones that work the most. The black ones I'll use for its low light or before dawn, or if the water is very murky. Also, the MEPS ones comes. This I use pretty much for trout fishing. They do more of a flashy colors. They have that bead, and instead of having a cylinder in the middle, they'll have like a bead, but pretty much the same design. I'll use those for the trout or when the water is really murky or dirty. It works great. As far as setups those goes, I kind of mentioned it. If I'm not really working it too fast or I'm throwing a very light one, you can do a BFS setup. If you don't have a BFS setup, you can throw it on your net rig rod, something that's medium or light, um, 10-pound test line or less. Make sure, like I mentioned, that your spool is not too tight. If I'm throwing it, like I mentioned, on top water, then I'm going to go with a top water setup, a heavier weight. That way I can get the distance of it. And again, if I'm throwing it somewhere 5-10 feet deep, I'll use my crankbait setup. Again, it's going to be a short episode with this. If you haven't used a inline spinner, I urge you, go get a few of them. The most you're going to spend on inline spinners, it's going to be like $3. I've never seen an inline spinner that's more expensive than $3. Rooster tails or MEPS, either one of them, they're under $3. What do you got to lose? $3. Go get yourself some. Have it tied all the time. If you're out fishing in the morning, if you see top water hits, if you see a bait fish just jumping, trying to get away from the predators, grab that rod, throw it out there. It is great for searching for baits too. I also do it a lot when I'm not on tournaments, trolling. If I'm going from one spot to another and I don't want to just waste time, I'll have that spinner bait, especially that half ounce. I'll cast it out behind me, have the rod on my hand, and just pedal my way to my next spot. and a lot of times I'll get hit. Bass and striped bass and stripers are usually the ones you're gonna get on open water when you're going from one spot to another. Again, it's a great bait. Go get yourself some. You are gonna thank me. And don't be afraid to use it on tournament day. It's a bait that hardly anybody uses it. And I think one of the reasons is, even if we don't want to admit it, we love to customize our own baits. That's why people love jig so much. That's why people love chatterbait so much, because we can change the trailers, we can put different color, a twin tail, we can put a fluke. With the jigs, same thing. You can customize the colors, you can customize the trailer, and whether we like to admit it or not, we feel that empowers us to show that decisions that we can make a difference. And it makes us feel better when we kind of customize our own baits, our favorite baits, and we catch on them, whether you like to admit or not. That's the reality of it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the inline spinner is not as popular, because really you can't there's nothing to customize. It's just an inline spinner. Goes with no trailers, really nothing to paint. You can paint the blade if you want, but why would you do that? Um, and I think a lot of people just they think it's an old man bait, and it doesn't seem like a cool bait. But I guarantee you, there's anglers out there winning tournaments, catching checks. That when they're on the stage and they're being interviewed, they won't say it, but I know a few of them are throwing inline spinners. Believe me, maybe not all of it. Maybe it's not the bait that's catching the most check, but trust me, there's an angler out there in every tournament that's catching a check, whether it's the top check or the bottom check, but it's catching a check because they're throwing an inline spinner. Again, go get them, Meps or Rooster Tails. You can get them Bass Pro Shop. You can pretty much get them anywhere. They're not the sexiest bait, but trust me, for $3, you're not going to go wrong, and you're going to love the results. That's it for me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, follow us on social media: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. And to enter again in the giveaway, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and sign your name in it so we'll know who you are and we'll announce the winners. Thank you so much. If you're going to be on the water, please wear your PFDs. Have a great night, everyone. Peace.